Hello.
It's not so giant women. And Daria and Ivy. We're going to take on the last episode of the third Stephen Bomb, Friendship.
Yeah. And given how we opened the Stephen Bomb, I'm guessing this may resolve the friendship. The Sardonyx issue between Garnet and Pearl, which has been a spectre over the bomb even when it's not actually featured.
Yes, like the previous episode where we basically didn't even acknowledge it except with some vaguely out of it facial expressions from Pearl. So yeah.
Let's see how we go this time.
Friendship.
We are the crystal gems. We'll always save the day. Right, Garnet?
It's a good step forward.
Foot joke. Finally.
While there is a degree of how things work, I do think we, the audience, could have only borne this Pearl and Garnet feud so much longer.
Right.
How did they resolve? Let's recap and find out.
Yay.
We open with Peridot in the war pub, snarking and griping about how everything's broken and this is such a crappy planet and all the things. She doesn't like Earth. I think we can say that.
I think so too.
Our heroes arrive because they found a super secret way of tracking her, and they try to catch her, but Pearl is getting all desperate and charging forward and not thinking, and kind of gives the anti-assist, or if you like, gives the assist for Peridot to get onto one of the few working warp pads and walk out of there. Pearl is still desperately trying to appease Garnet, who's still not having it. Back at the beach house, we find that they have been tracking her via hacking, I suppose, into her escape pod. And at any time Peridot uses the warp system, they should be able to find out where she went. Amethyst and Stephen are getting those awkward / totally sick of these feelings of Pearl and Garnet still not speaking. And while Pearl is trying to make amends, it's sort of put forward that she's trying to make amends too soon. She's trying to patch up. If you're of some religious bent, she's looking for absolution without repentance.
No.
They'll do it. However, all this interrupted when they find that Peridot has warped to another location. This location is where some disused gem craft have been sitting for, well, presumably since the first Gems on Earth era. They're all overgrown, half shut down, and in no state to fly. Our heroes enter, see Peridot appear over one of the video chat things, which is having trouble because everything's covered in moss and overgrowth and everything, and Steve and Amethyst have to use the transmitting crystals, kind of like Earth microphones, which for some reason I found incredibly cute. They tell Peridot she's not going to fly away in this ship, but Peridot says of course she's not. It's here to trap them. After a few goes at Peridot's end trying to press buttons, ray guns, I suppose, for want of a better word, emerge from the roof and start shooting at them under Stephen's shield. They can get out of the room, but the tunnel they go into is covered in spikes, and they have to keep running through that while taunted by Peridot over the PA, I guess. They get out of that area where a hologram of Peridot taunts them some more, and Pearl, who's really mentally crashing and burning by this point, tries to attack the hologram over and over, which kind of underscores how badly she's doing that. It's Pearl, of all people, who's not processing that it's a hologram. After some more of this, the floor gives way beneath them like a huge trapdoor to a pit below. Amethyst managed to use her whips to stop herself and Stephen from falling, but Pearl and Garnet end up in a bottom of a pit, and the door, the lid, the floor, however you want to put it, closes back over them. Steve and Amethyst are all like, oh, how are we going to get out of this? Well, fortunately for them and for the viewers, because they're still... This is another episode where they're slightly pushing the Stevens in every scene rule by they just happens to be like CCTV into the death pit that automatically turns on to the area above. But, okay, Gem's got a gem. With the two trapped down there, Amethyst observes, oh, they're starting to talk about this like grown-ups, and when Amethyst is wishing you talk like a grown-up, you know things are bad. But just when that's getting going, huge gears in the ceiling move, and the walls and floor and everything starts closing in on the two in the pit. Amethyst manages to summon up a whip to jam the cogs just at the it'd be too late moment. So they're cramped in there, but they're no longer being crushed. This gives the two a chance to talk it out a bit. Pearl desperately saying, I just want to capture Peridot to make you happy again. And Garnet's all like, it doesn't work that way. Pearl confessing she liked how she felt when she was fused with Garnet, how she's just a Pearl. So we're back into the gems as subcategories business again. And Pearl's definitely not being top of the heap. They talk some more and appear to reach at least some level of understanding, if not necessarily outright forgiveness right away. Then Amethyst's whip snaps, the cogs start moving again, and the two in the pit realize there's only one way out of this. Pearl says to Garnet, as long as it's okay with you. And they briefly refuse to Sardonyx, who turns her mallet into a drill head umbrella thing to blast her way up and out of the pit before immediately separating. Their sense of group identity's somewhat repaired at least. They go to seek the still snarking about ancient tech Peridot, who after a bit more taunting and insulting tries to make an escape by turning her magic cyborg finger hands into a helicopter.
Yeah.
Stephen grabs her foot and Amethyst grabs Stephen and Pearl grabs Amethyst and Garnet grabs Pearl, showing a bit of teamwork. Some more back and forth bantering and bitching between heroes and villain, and Peridot's foot comes away. It's like a boot or a prosthetic or something. She flies off, short one foot. The others collapse with nothing but the foot to show for their efforts, and Garnet acknowledges that it's at least a good first step. And Stephen lauds her pun, and we go to credits.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a lot into this episode, slightly by starting the story a few steps along, because we jump straight into, we have a way to track Peridot and not 5 minutes of tinkering and arguing over the escape pod in how to track Peridot. We just do it. It lets us drive straight into the Peridot chasing action, which becomes the catalyst for everything else.
I'm sure Pearl is sad she didn't get to give exposition, though. She only got a little.
She certainly loved to give a good blurb of the gem spaceship graveyard, which Garnet told her off for, but to be fair, I think Stephen needed to know that at the time.
He asked. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, they did jump right into the action. Actually, the beginning felt a little weird to me, maybe partly because they broke the Stephen's perspective thing for a few minutes. They sometimes show us like a few seconds before he gets there. And that's what Peridot was doing until they showed up. But I almost felt like it had a weird, like almost, I thought it was going to be like they're dreaming that this will happen or something, because it just seemed so sudden. And they were, yeah.
I mean, so far, I've kind of assumed the Stephen's always there rule has been not rock hard in that he literally has to be visible in every frame. But this is one of the few times he's ever been outright absent while something's going on.
Yeah, I think the times that they've commented on it, they're like, well, we move it around a little bit. Like, you know, you might see a couple people talking before he walks into the room, you know, stuff like that. So they do bend it a little bit, but it wasn't giving us like incredibly important information when he wasn't there. It was just kind of setting the scene, I guess.
And the stuff with the CCTV and the death trap at the end, I think was very much just stuck there. So Stephen can be observing this, so it can be happening. I'm under no illusions that's just because Stephen has to know this is happening, and it's entirely a sop to that.
I really like the pacing of this episode, but there were definitely some conveniences taken, some kind of tropey things, extremely tropey things with literally putting two people in a box that need to work things out and squishing them closer together. Like the plot is doing that to them, you know?
Yeah. I think the short episode and high pace lets them get away with that somewhat, because you're not given pause to think, oh, this is terribly convenient until after you're done. And once you're done, you're like, oh, well, we're on to the next one.
Right. But like you were saying, like, why would there be a CCTV thing to show us what's happening in the death pit? But like, what was that even for? What would you be crushing? Something was there, and maybe there was some reason that someone would want to observe what was being crushed in there. But what would they have been crushing?
Well, this does seem one of those. And this is our old spaceship, which just as a corridor that people can run up and risk death with a squashy pit at the bottom, or at the end, I should say. It's like, what is HR like in Gem? This is not good workplace safety.
No, like, yeah, what could all of this apparatus have been for? I mean, there's death lasers and everything.
And I mean, I briefly thought, is this for if they take prisoners, but do they take prisoners that you have to take through the main control room first?
Right.
So,
and you kind of get the idea that this is like a colonization vessel or an initial settling barge or something, It's like, what would this have been for besides they're sending their initial scouts out or their colonial crews?
Maybe ancient gems were just really mean.
Maybe they just didn't have anything to do, so they were always worried about who they were going to have to take prisoner within the crew.
Yeah, maybe treachery was rife. Maybe they were always trying to do Klingon-style promotions where you get to the rank up by killing the one above you. Unless you're a Pearl, apparently.
Yeah, so we got that little juicy phrasing from her.
Yeah, I mean, however it works, Pearls are definitely looking like the underclass of Gem Society.
Yeah, she said that she's just a Pearl and she needs someone to tell her what to do. Like it's in her nature that she can't tell herself what to do.
Are they like the servant class, or worse, the slave class? And apparently in all these thousands of years, there's been no emancipation because Pearl feels this way, and visitors from modern homeworld have been all, oh, you're just a Pearl. So obviously just a Pearl is the thing that's been going on for quite some time.
Yeah. So.
Like Jasper came in and said, oh, a Pearl, but they have voting rights now.
Right. Voting rights. Well, I guess at least it would be somebody to vote for besides Mayor Dewey.
I don't know, some of the vibe I get from Gem Society so far, it's they have the elections every few Gem years, but you always have you got like one candidate so they can tell themselves they're democratically elected.
Yeah, well, if I try to make any jokes about this, I could either be accused of misleading you on purpose or accused of spoilering you. So I'm just going to shut up. Yeah. But yeah, they do. I mean, based on that and based on how Jasper talked and everything, it seems like they've got a class system that is based on what kind of gem you are. So Pearl is kind of down on herself, that she feels like she's not really responsible for herself and that she's like groping around for someone to follow because she's just feels lost.
And for centuries, until Stephen's age years ago, she could always just look straight to Rose to get all her cues consciously or otherwise.
And she clearly did do that.
Yeah, that's not a huge extrapolation. That's what she does.
Yeah. And I guess with Rose gone, she's like, well, who's the next biggest? That would be Garnet. So, and she is, she's the leader. So that it's like she just transferred herself. I'm sure she doesn't feel about Garnet the way that she felt about Rose, but she definitely was kind of, I don't know, some of the things that she did in Cry for Help and tried to sort of justify and or explain in this episode were just very much like, she felt directionless and that she wanted to be, I don't know, it just seems like maybe she's devolving. She's like feeling more and more like desperate.
Maybe fearing being metaphorically beat back down to regular Pearl level. That she sort of had the comfort of being an equal for all this time, but there's a part of her that fears if she's pissed off the ostensible leader enough, that said leader might go, okay, you go back to, I was going to say scrubbing the benches, but she actually does do that and likes it. So
And likes it.
You go back and live in a cupboard under the stairs.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah, it's complicated. It's really complicated. I mean, especially since we're talking about a type of creature that is not a human creature. So we don't know like how much of this caste system is social and how much of it is like literally designed into them.
Yeah, most Pearls sort of just so subservient to the core that they couldn't even entertain the thoughts our Pearl has. Is she actually like, by Pearl standards, an outright mental aberration, not just a social or caste one.
Jasper did call her defective.
Yeah, so this could be one of those good old-fashioned supervillain freedom of thought is defective ones.
Yeah. But she is a crystal gem. She's a rebel, even if she was following someone else who told her to do it. So it's kind of weird.
Oh, Pearl, you're almost there.
She really is kind of a mess. That conversation with Garnet was interesting because she did say, I'm sorry toward the beginning, but then the whole resolution wasn't really an apology. And it wasn't really like that they figured it out. They were like, okay, this is going to be what you have to do to have a starting point, basically, to be trusted again. It's very realistic in terms of building back trust that you lost. You can't just say, what do I do? What do I have to do to make you forgive me? It's not a transaction. It's like, you have to understand what the problem was and the other person will decide. You don't get to just pay for it and pay it off like a loan. The other person decides when you can be trusted.
Yes, in this scenario, we're literally past the point of apologies because she certainly apologized. It's just, as you say, that's not all there is to it. The explanation from her might have prized Garnet's thought processes open that little bit more, which helped them take the next step.
Yes.
But they're now at the stage where they're at least trying to heal that damage, but I'm not sure how much will be in actual episodes going forward. But in terms of how we see the characters at the end of this one, it's healing, which is good, but it's not just done with, sealed, papered over.
Right. It's not like there was a big joyous hug and they both said, I forgive you or whatever.
But we got some literal and symbolic showing that the group dynamic is on better terms again.
Right. With a good step forward with a foot joke.
And when they charged in at the end, Pearl didn't just literally charge in and make a mess of things.
Right. That she was such a mess at the beginning because she was trying to do that. She was trying to prove herself to Garnet. And that was really just, I've talked about it in a couple of the previous episodes, I guess, but she thinks that is what's going to work. Like, and it really is disturbing that that's what she was more and more desperately trying to do to earn back Garnet's favor when that was never the problem. And I don't know, I guess I think that maybe because Garnet also focused on that Pearl messed up the mission, Pearl distracted them with fake stories about Peridot rebuilding the hub, like that Pearl thought that was the problem because, when Garnet was betrayed like that, she didn't talk about her feelings. She dealt with her feelings somewhere else and didn't let Pearl see them, except that she was angry with her. And so, she had been violated in such a deep way that she's just like, I'm not talking to her about this. I'm not going to tell her how much she hurt me and why, because she should already know why that should never have been in the realm of possibility for something that you do to your oldest friend in the world. But it's kind of sad to me that when they finally talked out some of this stuff, Garnet still kind of had to shepherd her through the thought process. Like she was the victim in the situation, but then she still had to choose to walk Pearl through all of that and help her understand why what she did was so wrong.
Well, so many of Pearl's
it's hard to watch.
previous feelings about another being, another person so far would be about Rose, who, what we've seen so far, doesn't bear grudges, at least not like that. So it'd be, I'm sorry, Rose, forgive me. That's fine. Okay, love everything.
Right. Yeah. Whereas Garnet was even more stoic and silent than usual, and you could really feel it.
And Amethyst is also right and astonishingly mature, but as we've pointed out, this is also pointing to where the other two have got to, in that, yes, these are valid feelings. Yes, this is a big matter, but you two can't carry on like this forever.
Right.
We've all got to live.
Amethyst's commentary.
We've all got to live and work and everything together. I mean, she doesn't say this, but she may as well do. And you can't just have it in this suspended growl the whole time. And, maybe if this meant there had to be a change of situation, then that would be something. It turned out they didn't, but maybe they needed to talk it out, which is what close to what eventually happened. But this is not only is it awkward and upsetting for Amethyst and Stephen, it's getting to the point of being impractical for the household,
Right.
for the team, for the mission,
Yeah.
for 3/4 of it to carry on this way.
Yeah, that it was very obvious that they were a mess in their fighting style and stuff, that the whole vibe was not working.
Yeah, it's like your feelings are entirely
And I
valid,
liked it.
but Peridot doesn't care.
Yes, yeah, we're going to have to be professionals here, but like they couldn't because everybody was preoccupied with what was going on, primarily Pearl, because she was just, Garnet was willing to speak to Pearl to give her orders and stuff. She was willing to engage, and like she was colder than usual about it, but she was still doing it. Whereas Pearl was just like, I'm going to interrupt everybody and try to finish their threatening sentences. And I'm going to dive in front of things and run over and try to kill holograms.
And both Stephen and Amethyst have kind of had their sort of outlet moments. Again, simplifying for the sake of television, but Amethyst got to unload it all to Vidalia, and Stephen had the road trip, which means as well as not being the main participants of the grudge, they've also been able to let it out and think about it rationally, which the other two really haven't.
Sure. I appreciate that they had that moment with Amethyst and Stephen where Amethyst was encouraging Garnet and Pearl to, isn't there something you two maybe should talk about? And then they got interrupted. And then she commented to Stephen that, Pearl could hand Peridot over on a silver platter and it wouldn't make up for the stunt she pulled to get Garnet to fuse with her. Like she knows that Pearl was the one who did something wrong, and that it's kind of on Pearl to do something, but Amethyst can watch this and know that Pearl's not doing the thing that Garnet wants.
Yeah.
I see that like everybody else knows what's going on.
Yeah, even if she caught Peridot single-handed, that would be a good thing, obviously, but a very superficial thing. And
Right.
it is not the damage. It is not the repair to the damage, moreover.
Yeah, and that's essentially what Garnet straight up told her down in that hole. She said, catching Peridot won't make things go back to normal.
In fact, that could have made things worse if Pearl did catch Amethyst and then went into this mindset of, well, that's solved now, which would leave things to fester even more.
Right, that she might even get resentful that it hadn't worked. Like I did the thing. Why aren't you proud of me? Kind of thing. Which was a little bit like what was going on in Cry for Help when Amethyst thought Garnet must be mad at her because she chose Pearl to fuse with. And she was like, I'm going to catch Peridot and then she'll think I'm cool. So it's not like this is an unusual thing to think about. Garnet's going to be impressed if I catch Peridot. That's the thing. She must be very focused on the mission. And, Garnet doesn't open up about kind of what's going on in her head very much. So that's kind of what Pearl, I guess, was thinking. Garnet must be so mad at me, yes, for lying to her, but also because of this mission that I wrecked. So I'm going to fix it. And then she'll be sated or whatever. But, there's, again, like being the person that, me relating to Garnet on a bunch of levels here, like having to kind of, I feel like I've spent a lot of my life being one of the only people I know who's basically like, I'm not struggling with myself, my self-confidence, my identity. I'm very confident in all of those things. And I meet a lot of people who are not. So they kind of end up trying to be like me or follow what I'm doing. And in that process, instead of trying to do it like I do it, they want to kind of be very clingy the way that Garnet and Pearl were in this. And it's not quite as literal as that. And I'm also not a 7-foot tall space rock, but I relate to Garnet in that way. That's one of the things I don't struggle with. And it doesn't mean I don't have problems, but I don't struggle with my sense of self at all. And so to see that, she gets in this situation where one of the few things that can hurt her did hurt her, the betrayal and the violation of the sanctity of that relationship that is her, that Pearl would disrespect that in that way. That's one of the few things that can really just kind of destroy her. And in order to talked to Pearl about how serious this was, she ended up having to kind of get vulnerable with Pearl about, I fell apart over this. I'm not perfect. I have weaknesses. And even though she prioritizes her strength to be this good leader and that she knows everybody looks up to her and she just has to, even when she's not feeling as together, she has to put on a face and move forward because people need someone to follow. She doesn't have a person to come to when she feels like that. She just has to deal with it herself. She has to resolve it on her own. And it's just like that whole scene is really hard for me to watch because I see what Garnet is doing. She's like, Pearl is brittle and she's not going to get through this herself. And, even though I was the one who was hurt here, I have to help her get through how she feels about hurting me. It's really something.
Yeah, which means she probably also has that inkling of, no, we can't stay in this place forever. And even though I'm the one who was hurt, it looks like I shall nudge us forward rather than wait for Pearl on principle.
Right.
While Peridot waits for the Earth to expire, but this planet has an expiry date.
Yep. So you caught that one.
Yeah, and
that was mysterious.
Yeah, and it wasn't just, move on to that, because it wasn't just we're going to blow up this planet sooner or later thing. This was, there's something in the mix, something's in the works.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and she just wants to get out.
Yeah, either her priorities or information has shifted because she's no longer just, this planet sucks, I don't care about it. She's got an active concern that it's not going to be here anymore, and she would rather not experience that firsthand.
Yeah, definitely what I took from that too.
And especially because expiry date on its own might have just been a clunky metaphor, but then she says, and I'm not going to stick around to find out when it is. That's
right,
talking
so
about something.
Yeah, it's not like there's a stick of dynamite that she can look at the readout on it, or a specific date when, somebody from space, from Homeworld is just going to pull out a space laser.
And it's not something undefined, like just another way of saying, this planet's days are numbered, right, which people say even when there is not actually a number to go with it.
Yeah. Oh, Peridot. Peridot, her fighting was interesting in the beginning when she's trying to use these tools to fight the crystal gems. And it kind of seems like she's really inexperienced and even sometimes seems like a little perplexed by things that worked. She's like, oh, that does that. I don't think
she looks surprised when Stephen stopped the spire or whatever that was collapsing on the four of them. And she's like, I thought that would do the trick. I guess not.
Yeah. Stephen was really good in that. Even though Peridot was the enemy, I was surprised that he was willing to hit her in the head with his shield.
Yay! He usually, and we've commented on this before, he usually uses the shield for its intended protection purpose. He not often does the whole Captain America thing.
That's right. And we got to see him do that this time. He was very competent this time. Like there's that, and there's pulling out the shield when everybody needed to be shielded from the lasers and everything. He was good.
Yeah, I noticed this, that it probably really happened earlier, but this is the absolute lock on this power of Stephen he can absolutely use when he has to and as it's supposed to. So, yeah. I don't know if we're going to have future... turns out Stephen's got yet another power we haven't heard about before episodes, but this one is well and truly in there. Not only can he activate the shield in itself when he needs to, in terms of his own command and skill, but he can activate it when he needs to in terms of tactics and battle.
Yeah, high pressure situations. Although it does seem to kind of take something out of him. He seemed to be a little tired after the third one. He said 3 shields in one day. And then they had to run from spikes.
Yeah, I noted that. That fits. We've only seen him sort of do it properly for sort of once or twice at a time before, and certainly not all in a row.
Yeah. And he's being taken as a member of the team all the time. He's really leveled up. Our little Stephen. He's still the same size.
So speaking of sizes, we had some real animation antics going on of Garnet's hair this time.
Yeah.
Well, it was the hugest we've ever seen it. I think they were having a few perspective issues, but when we were looking down on them in the pit, it was enormous. And at first I thought, oh, there's a shadow, but no, nothing else is casting a shadow. Her hair is just huge, made all the more noticeable by next time we go to it at another angle. It's one of the smaller sizes than it's been.
Yeah. It's interesting how the perspective will change on some of these angles, and it'll very much change how they show up, like especially in that confined space. I liked the visuals of that, even though it's very tropey, like just seeing Pearl and Garnet in this tiny space, and how very, very like little Pearl looks next to Garnet. Garnet just fills up that space, not just with her hair. She's just so huge. And it makes her feel very big, compared to Pearl, also like sort of emotionally, like she's taking up space in this very intimate conversation where Pearl is trying to say like, oh, you're perfect and you're the perfect relationship and I want to be like you and all of this. It's like, wow.
And speaking of visual things, at the end, when the roof was blown out and we got what I assume was supposed to be dusk coloring, the Amethyst and Pearl looked like they had regular human skin tones, which is kind of bizarre to see because, well, usually they're lavender and cream with a hint of green.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Garnet less so because for most of the first part of the show, she was a deeper brown and much closer to actual human skin brown. She only became a bit purpler a bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But we've not seen these two sort of, well, look like, again, regular human skin colors before. So it just looks odd for a moment because it's something you don't usually see.
Yeah. It's not something that I particularly pick up on in general, but with you saying that, I remember that glow of the lighting does do that. It's really interesting. And they were forming a chain to grab Peridot to try to stop her from flying away. It's like, oh no. I mean, yeah, symbolism wise, again, it was very effective to see them all working together to do that. But like, gee, if only someone had a whip to bring her down, come on, guys.
If only someone could shapeshift into like a bird or something.
Fly after her. Yeah. Yeah. Just Peridot is flicking Stephen in the face. Get your touch stumps off me, you Stephen.
Yeah, like that. She still hasn't entirely got a grasp on Stephen has an individual name, unlike most of her species and subspecies or whatever.
Yeah.
Pearl's called Pearl, and she's a Pearl. Stephen's called Stephen, so he must be a Stephen.
Yeah, it works in all of her experience, so it's really funny.
And to be fair, I don't think the crystal gems expected her foot or whatever to pop off.
They did seem surprised. I mean, typically when we've seen gems get injured or have their bodies damaged in any way, like poof. So not used to seeing a limb come off.
Yeah, so either this is like a starfish thing where a limb can just come off, or she's, unlike the rest of the gems, not technically naked and has in fact been wearing, like, I don't know, platforms this entire time.
Right. Or at least maybe Peridots are different from the rest.
Yeah, maybe her fingers aren't attached to her hands, so maybe she can detach bits naturally, and she just prioritized escaping over getting her foot back.
Yeah. I just think in scenes like that, you always think of things that they definitely could have done to either chase after her or get her back. What they tried to do was just not exactly the most practical thing, but I did like that visual image of the four of them making a chain, holding her down. Yeah. But she flew away.
Yeah.
Did the cartoon villain thing. I'll get you next time, Crystal Gems. Just you wait.
Maybe they got some science they can do on her foot or something.
There you go. Give it to Pearl.
Maybe next time we see Peridot, she's had to put like a can under her stump to get around.
There you go. Oh, goodness.
Which does raise questions. I mean, can gems lose? I mean, just as humans can lose body parts without dying, can gems lose body parts without poofing out? I guess this, if it is an actual part of her body and not just a huge boot, then yes.
Interesting, because thinking about the times that we've actually seen gems get poofed. We saw Pearl and it was a sword through her chest. So that's not really like losing a limb. That would be a lethal injury if it was a person. But
we explored the notion of organ approximates at the time.
yeah, we saw Garnet get poofed, but that was electricity. That was like some kind of, that was a gem destabilizer.
Yeah, I got the impression that that was its explicit purpose, to turn one back into an actual gem. So it might not even have been the level of injury per se, so much as this is what it's designed to do. That's the intended result.
The frequency is that you need it. That thing emits. And Amethyst just got her ass kicked by the slinker over and over, which seems to kill gems by squeezing them. So I guess we haven't seen a similar injury.
No, I mean, and normally, even though this is not a typical kids show, normally you can't dismember characters on screen, even if they do have healing gem comas.
Yeah.
But she seemed more annoyed than pained or even seriously bothered.
Right.
So
It seemed like she kind of pushed a release and it came off.
Actually, yeah, that's right. It didn't just pop off like they pulled too hard. She did something. So I guess that points closer to the prosthetic/boot thing. Unless she's a cyborg, which is quite possible, which I suppose technically makes it prosthetic.
Right. And she is kind of a tech gem. So
yeah. And well, there's something going on with those hands where she makes blasters and tablets and things out of them.
Yeah.
It seems unlikely that this is a standard issue gem ability. Right.
Yeah. So, and speaking of Peridot, I really liked the voice acting for her in this episode. Shelby Rivera did an amazing job with all of the villain cackling and the spikes. You like my spikes? That comes, die, 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 die. You clod.
Yeah, I kind of like it's a child's idea of supervillainy that Peridot is performing, and it works for, this, Delta level admin assistant or whatever she actually is.
Yeah.
I don't know if gems have fiction in their culture, but it is like a child who saw a bunch of movies and thinks that's what actual evil people act like.
Right. Yeah. It's very silly. And it almost seemed, especially with the propeller fingers and flying away and saying, I'll get you next time. It was just like, oh, this is another reference to Inspector Gadget. I don't know if it actually was, although Inspector Gadget is the one with the helicopter and Dr. Claw or whatever is the one who says, I'll get you next time, Gadget.
So I'll get you next time was pretty standard cartoon villain fare back then even, so.
Absolutely. I'll get you next time. Yeah. So Peridot is very much filling that cartoon villain role for us right now. So do you think it'll be a little while before we see her again, or do you think we're hot on the trail to get Peridot now?
I think we might have a breather episode or two, just sort of post-resolution of Pearl and Garnet, but I don't think it'll be like another couple dozen episodes before we get back to that story or anything.
Okay, so if Daria was writing Steven Universe, we'd have 1 or 2 episodes.
Yeah, 1 or 2 episodes after the emotional intensity of all this, just to, maybe even one of the random episodes where, like, Steven finds out what seafood is or something.
Yeah. Like with your track record in predicting weird things, like, wouldn't it be so funny if the next episode comes on and he's just like sitting there in front of a bowl of shrimp and you'll be like, see, I knew it.
Well, I know earlier on, less so now, but there used to be what regular real world thing can Stephen not have heard about this week?
Yeah. Yeah. What else do we need to talk about in this one? You like the ship? The outside of the ship was really cool.
Yeah, I liked that. And I liked the art of it having overgrown over the years, with that even though Perry's been tinkering with it, there's just too much jungle to just brush it away, and reality ensures that you can't just leave a spaceship in the middle of the jungle for thousands of years and hope you can just turn the key or whatever and off you go.
Right. I like that it was Amethyst who said, looks like Earth won this battle.
Oh, I did like that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Just comes in there and she's like, oh, look at that. It's a greenhouse.
Partly because it's reminding us that Amethyst is technically an Earthling. Well, not technically, she is an Earthling, if you want to use that term, really. She was born on Earth. That's just a geographic distinction, not a species one.
Yeah, that's right.
And as far as we know, she's only been off-world for a few hours back in the jailbreak stuff.
Yeah. I don't think there were any other places where she left the planet, at least not that we've seen.
And I like it on a superficial level because there's this nice little, screw you, the evil invading homeworld gems.
Yeah. You leave something on Earth and we will digest it, much like Amethyst herself.
There we go. That's her bond with her home planet.
Yeah. Amethyst is kind of evolving as a character. Like, even though she's still very much like her sloppy and eat everything and insult people self, you know, this sort of what you mentioned with the maturity, and then just kind of, she seems to be taking a little more responsibility, I guess. Like, well, I've noticed before that a lot of times in group battles, she's the one that watches over Steven, and she caught him in this episode when he was falling. She made sure that he didn't go splat. And I've noticed that she does that in several other episodes. When there's a group being attacked, she like shelters him or grabs him.
And even though this week it was in sharp relief because Pearl was just being foolish.
Yes.
She's less inclined to charge straight in. She will take those few seconds to assess the situation, not necessarily always make the right assessment. That's kind of a next step along. But when she's not sort of in her bad place, a la fighting the slinker,
right,
she can think a bit more clearly. And in some ways, it's almost as though, well, whatever divine power, by which I mean Rebecca Sugar in this case, because when you think about their personalities on the surface, in terms of weapons, big Hulk hands would be more likely for Amethyst, and something graceful like a whip more likely for Garnet. So it's almost as though the universe, fate, Rebecca, has decided to temper their instincts or make them think that bit out of their comfort zone to get flexible by giving them atypical weapons to their personality type.
I read somewhere that at least with Amethyst and Pearl, she really wanted them to be basically exact opposites. So she wanted Pearl to be really rigid and wanted Amethyst to be flexible. And that's from everything from the weapon to the hair to the pointiness of their bodies versus the softness of Amethyst to the shape-shifting. Pearl won't do it, and Amethyst does it all the time.
Or even just their regular body language without shape-shifting or anything combat or magical. Pearl will sit like a lady, basically. You know, she'll have if they have a spine in there, however it works. I mean,
yeah.
This is one of those things where I think they were slightly backtracking themselves. Later episodes imply they've got nothing on the inside, but Pearl can be stabbed through something there. But whatever she uses for a spine is bolt upright, and her knees are together, and her hands are, if they're not doing something, usually placed neatly on her thighs. Whereas Amethyst is like slumped down, probably half lying down, maybe with resting her head on her hand or hands.
Yep. Yeah. And when they're standing up, Amethyst is a little bit slouchy, and Pearl is she'll stand there with she'll have her hands in some kind of pose, very delicate and very just deliberate.
And that's possibly why Amethyst is sometimes taller than Steven and sometimes not. I mean, obviously it's an animator thing, but you can also say, well, sometimes she's slouching more than others.
Yeah. I really like the body language on the show. They tend to do a very good job with just very consistent with the way the characters move. And it's so effective in reminding us of their personalities every moment that they're on the screen.
Who was storyboarding this time? Because we got some fairly blobby Steven action.
Well, that would probably be the Paul stuff.
There we go. Yeah, I thought so.
It's not Paul. It's Jeff and Joe this time.
Okay. Okay. It usually is Paul. I was wrong.
Yeah. The next episode I was thinking of, and that's a Raven and Paul episode, but this one's Jeff and Joe.
Okay. I guess they were just in a blobby Steven mood, or that's something that happens between storyboarder and animator.
I know that sometimes they bring in other people to do stuff, and even like without crediting them, or Rebecca Sugar touches episodes sometimes and doesn't put her name on the thing. And sometimes there'll be specific action sequences that they'll get someone to help with, or sometimes somebody that later is going to become a storyboarder will be brought in to do some stuff, and I don't know the specifics of anything on this episode, but yeah.
And we do know, at least I know in other shows, sometimes what the animator does can end up a bit different from what they were given, which could be a few lines here. In some shows, it means putting entirely the wrong character in, but this show's at least a bit above that.
Yeah. That's true. What else can I talk about? I feel like there might be a couple of things I wanted to touch on about we've spent a lot of time on it, but the conversation that they had in that little box, one of the things that Garnet said was, I have weaknesses too, but I choose not to let them consume me, which is a really interesting way of phrasing that. Like at first glance, it's very inspiring to say, I have weaknesses too, but I choose not to let them consume me. But I think that is a choice that someone like her can make and someone like Pearl can't.
Well, it's also could go a negative way too. I mean, that phrase on its own, as she said, I don't let them consume me, but you could also nudge that a bit in the other direction and put her in a self-toxicating state of denial.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that she rarely displays her emotions means this is a very hard read on how that actually manifests in her.
I think you're right. Yeah. We don't really know how that would look, because I think when Garnet is destabilized, she literally falls apart. And then we see how Ruby and Sapphire process it. We don't, that's as broken down as she gets. So I don't know. It's like Garnet as herself is probably telling the truth there. Like she is the product of their stability that forms her. So of course, that's what she thinks of as herself, and that is hers. Is very interesting because she's saying that to Pearl, who essentially reads as, the anxiety at the level that she experiences it just seems like it could be signaling to viewers as like an anxiety disorder or some kind of mental illness that she struggles with, the gem version of that. And, people who struggle with those kinds of things, they can't just be told, well, handle it differently, like they're working with different raw material. And I think that that's much harder for Pearl than it would be for Garnet. So, but, Garnet, she had a lot of lines because she's not a talker, we've talked about this before. So when she's talking, it's like, it's so impactful. And then she's talking about that effect that she has on others. Like that she literally says in this episode, I struggle to stay strong because I know the impact I have on everyone. And that was a big one for me too, is that she knows that that's the effect she has. And that's part of the reason that she acts the way she does.
Yeah, an acknowledgement that despite what she said in the past, this isn't the flat team structure she might wish it were.
Yeah. It's interesting that she also said to Pearl that sometimes, like, what did she say? Please understand you have an impact too. There are times when I look up to you for strength. And Pearl's eyes got really big at that point.
Like, what?
I know. And
strong.
I never really got that read from Garnet that she looks up to Pearl, except that she does know what Pearl is good at. So maybe that's kind of her version of it. It's very interesting because I'm sure she's never said that to her before.
And I think also because Garnet so often wears her emotions on the inside, it's not as obvious as everyone the way others look up to her, or as completely freaking raw as Pearl looking up to Rose.
Right. There was never any question of those emotions. I guess especially Amethyst and Pearl are both very demonstrative how they're reacting to something. Whereas like you said with Garnet, she's probably had reactions that none of us can detect them. And I guess she knows that. And that's why she's having to use very plain words to tell Pearl, that she has an impact on other people, and that she even has moments where she needs Pearl's strength for herself. That's a big deal.
It's also ironically a little bit of a don't be so wrapped up in yourself, Pearl.
Right. Because then even if Garnet didn't say that, she has to know that Steven looks up to her. and that her just having breakdowns all the time, it's like got to be really destabilizing for him. But it's very hard for someone like Pearl to think about that in those terms. And she doesn't necessarily have control over when she has a breakdown. You know, some of us just don't. So, I don't know. You don't really see the struggle that Garnet mentioned, where she said, I struggle to stay strong, because you really believe Garnet's confidence is not an act. None of that is an act. That's completely, she is what she seems to be, but the presentation of herself as very strong and as not struggling with that sometimes, that's kind of a relief to know that there is some struggling there, and that she thinks about how she looks to others. And that Pearl had the power to upend that through her actions and literally make Garnet fall apart over it. That was really something. Ugh, that was a really emotional week of episodes.
Yeah. I mean, even though chasing Peridot was the catalyst, that's really the smallest part of it. I mean, by the end, they're only really 1 foot or boot or whatever up on the situation. I wonder if it was tempting for them to cap this off by having them capture Peridot, but I guess not. But we're still not entirely sure what she's up to, so might need her out there doing it.
Well, now she just seems to be like, well, she was trying to rebuild the warp pad this time, so it seems like she's just trying to leave. Because I guess, after all, the Earth is going to expire.
Yeah, and whatever's going on, Homeworld aren't returning her calls.
Yeah. She got no response for her thing that she did.
I don't know if they're back there going, oh, we've just got word that a gem is on this planet that we're about to destroy. My goodness, who is it? It's Peridot. And whatever.
Who gives a crap? Wow.
We got rid of Jasper successfully. This will be 2 for 2. Just leave it.
She's in an ocean somewhere. That's got to be a weird one to them. Like, what the hell keeps happening every time we send gems over there?
But they're apparently not too worked up.
Yeah, nobody's looking for them, as far as we know.
I also accidentally nearly applied my literal headcanon from that story I dreamt but didn't actually write, because I thought, oh, that's right. I made up the idea that there's a shield around Earth. That's not a real thing from the show.
Funny.
In that alternate final episode I dreamt, our heroes were able to put basically a other gem-proof shield around the Earth, which is what kind of brought everything to a state of detente in the long run.
That's funny.
But yeah, in this it's the other way around, in that they can perfectly get through to the Earth. It's more that they just don't actually have a warp pad that functions.
I liked being that we're spending so much time with communication through computers during this whole pandemic and everything happening. I really especially appreciated when the tech wasn't working and stuff, when Peridot kept getting mad. And the echoes when she's waiting, when they're trying to yell at each other.
Well, he looks a lot more familiar after the past couple of years of, no, you go, hang on. Okay, now you go.
Yeah. That was funny. I enjoyed that. What else is there to say about this one? Well, we got to see Sardonyx again.
Yes, though ever so briefly. So we didn't get to hear her speak, which is a shame, because I love the way she talks.
I didn't have to pay Alexia Kadim this time.
But I mean, I easily get that the point wasn't to have another Sardonyx moment, and it was partly to prove that Pearl could, in fact, separate as soon as she was no longer necessary.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, as we were kind of discussing the resolution that they had, it's not completely there yet, but they can do this. They can work together. And it's just that certainly Garnet is not up for fusion fun time right now with Pearl.
And Pearl, unlike last time, has the responsibility not to try to push the issue.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I have loads more probing questions to ask.
I was just thinking, talking about the fusions, I have something I could ask you about the fusions here, but it might be a little bit of a convoluted question. So let's see if I can make something coherent out of it. We've got this conclusion of the Sardonyx arc. We've now seen Garnet fuse with Amethyst and get a disaster. And we've seen Garnet fuse with Pearl and get a disaster, although not in the same way. So like, I don't know, I find that kind of interesting. But so like, I'm not sure if Amethyst was completely like that they were acting like Amethyst was the problem in that fusion. Obviously, Pearl's betrayal here was the problem with Sardonyx. But I mean, do you have any thoughts on what Garnet might need to do to make her fusions with others be better?
Maybe when she fuses, some of the stuff she's been keeping in check all unleashes. So maybe she does, along with what she was saying this week, need to let her emotions free, let them stretch a bit more. Maybe that's what. Then she can't keep them bottled up when she's fusion's next one up. That breaks the seal. So
right.
Doing that, then maybe Sardonyx might not be quite destructively addictive. Maybe I'm blanking on the other one's name.
Sugilite?
Sugilite, yes, thank you. Don't know where that went. Maybe Sugilite wouldn't be just walking early years Incredible Hulk disaster.
Yeah, this is interesting that both of them, both Sugilite and Sardonyx, are kind of a manifestation of what the non-Garnet gem would kind of do with Garnet's confidence. And, Sugilite gets smashy and Sardonyx gets arrogant. But like, it's kind of almost like, I don't know. I mean, this whole disaster with Sardonyx was not directly Sardonyx related. It was something Pearl did. But the Sugilite thing, it was kind of like I don't know. I mean, she was, depending on how you look at it, she was half Garnet or 2/3 Garnet. And yet Garnet said she was going to fuse with Pearl because that was safer versus Amethyst. And that because that was a disaster. And so Amethyst felt like she was being blamed for that. Like she was what makes Sugilite that way. So it's hard to kind of trace where all of those things come from and whether if you're going to kind of say it's like this because of Amethyst, it's like this because of Pearl, you have to wonder like, well, where is Garnet's responsibility in this? What could she maybe change to make those be better?
I mean, I also took Amethyst feeling responsible as part of if you poke Amethyst in certain ways, her self-esteem issues kick in.
Yeah, I think so. Whereas Sardonyx is almost the entire other way because she's so confident and she's so like, look at me, I'm amazing. Watch while I do this and tell you all the adjectives that describe me.
It does seem that while they can influence what their fusion does, I don't think they can influence what their fusion is, at least not to a conscious, steady degree. So,
right. But, if they're living relationships, I know relationships do evolve. So I wonder.
But I mean, granted, we've only seen each fusion a small number of times, and we haven't heard any of, last time we formed Sugilite, she was some enormous angry brute, but now that we've worked on this, she might form as smaller and smarter and weaker or something.
I don't know.
And in fact, when they formed Sugilite, they got it straight from Garnet saying, we got to be big. So that's obviously, right. I guess there's a certain amount of dice rolling when a fusion is first formed.
Probably. We don't know much about that.
So could work on their attitude by working on the component's attitude. But I think when it comes to some of the basic things, there's only so much they can do.
Yeah. I participated in a discussion at one point where someone was kind of upset that Garnet never really talked to Amethyst about that. She just let Amethyst kind of feel like it was her fault, even though Garnet kind of tried to take part of the responsibility. She said, like, you can be brash and I can be brash, you can be reckless, and we can both get carried away. But still, then Amethyst felt like it was her fault because, I mean, then Garnet just turned right around and picked somebody else. So I don't know.
Because Garnet remained the one component that was still used, whereas Amethyst was sidelined entirely.
Yeah.
Even though Opal would have been next to useless for that task.
Right. And speaking of Opal, I find it really interesting that Pearl and Amethyst, especially earlier on, they were always bickering. They were always at each other's throats, but their fusion was the only one that hasn't been like kind of a disaster. Alexandrite wasn't either, but she was not very stable either. So
maybe if they thought a bit more, giving Alexandrite a try at destroying the communications relay. But I think I don't find it a plot hole to suggest they just simply didn't think of it. Not least because I think Garnet partly just didn't appreciate how much that hurt Amethyst. And partly, of course, she didn't know that Pearl was basically going to start getting high on being fused to her.
Right. And maybe she knew that Pearl had been wanting something like that and that they would enjoy themselves and that Sardonyx was maybe uniquely equipped to disable this tower.
And it wasn't that long in story terms since the sliver thing in which Amethyst had spent most of an episode griping and grunking and things, and Garnet might have thought to herself, I don't have time to deal with Amethyst doing a thing right now.
Probably, yeah. She was pretty businesslike about it. But that's Garnet. Get the job done, Garnet.
And they might have been, look, I indulged you when you poofed yourself like 9 times in an episode and imitated Pearl and all the rest of it, but
right.
It's not my actual job, girl.
Yeah, I could see that. And Amethyst does have that side to her, like when she gets really, I don't know, sort of bratty. But during
Garnet might also have thought, yeah, I know she does this, but I also know she gets over it sooner or later, so it'll hurt, but it'll heal.
Yeah.
I mean, we're selling Garnet's compassion a bit short here, but they were in a spot.
Yeah. All right.
Go check out our merch table.
You want to see merch stuff? Okay. Well, I'm going to do a couple of things for you. But the first one, because Peridot lost her foot, I'm going to show you my set of socks.
There we go.
So I have a set of no-show Steven Universe socks, and the first one is a Garnet set.
But of
and
course.
then there's this set, and we have a Pearl set.
Oh, cool.
And a Steven set.
Oh, so another one we've actually got all the lead characters, which doesn't always happen.
And there's one more. You want to guess what it is?
Is it Lion?
No.
Oh, is it Greg? No, it's Cookie Cat.
It's Cookie Cat. So much Cookie Cat merch for something that showed up in the first episode. It's like the merchandisers watched episode 1 and they're like, we get this show now. It's all about Cookie Cat. So these are cute socks and I wear them a lot and they're fun.
Listeners may not know, but it's not uncommon to see a photo of Ivy in which she just so happens to be wearing something with Cookie Cat on it.
Yes. Yeah. We just had a Twitter conversation to that effect. Someone's asking, is that Cookie Cat? And Daria was like, I don't have to see the picture to say yes. But I'm also going to show you a couple of things that, I don't know, I guess the way that I could pretend this is related is we saw really old gem tech. And so I'm going to go back to something old. But I realized that some of the things that I showed you in earlier episodes, I couldn't show you the whole set of these toys because it was spoilery.
But now we've got 60 some episodes under our belt.
I realized that some of these sets, I can show you the whole thing now because they're not spoilery anymore because of either characters or outfits. So I'm going to show you, the first time I showed you original minis was in Bubble Buddies, I think, because it had Connie. But I have to move my camera to do this, and I'll show the people that are able to watch on YouTube. Here they are. These are my original minis. Can you see them? Okay.
Yeah.
So I've got, let me get this a little closer. Here, I've got Peridot. Peridot is very cute and seems to be smiling.
Yeah, oh, there's her eyes. Her eyes are almost bleached out by the angle, but there they are.
Yeah, they do a weird job with her visor. They kind of blank it out.
I guess it's another one of those, sometimes animation doesn't always translate well to 3D objects.
I think you're right. But anyway, the whole set exists. And it, for some reason, includes Peridot, but includes nobody else except the other main characters.
Is that 2 Garnets? Yes.
There are 2 Garnets. I'm trying to do a decent job showing them to you without showing you stuffed animals in the background that might be spoilers.
Oh, look at the foreground. Oh, I see. That's right. They've got different expressions.
Yeah. And we've got
And
Connie
poses.
and I've showed you before. And Steven, his cute little shield.
Yeah, looking all ready for action. Steven's going to bring it.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, let's see if I can get this to be steadier. I'm not very good with cameras, y'all. See my Animaniacs in the background?
Yeah, I caught them. There we go.
So that's my original minis. And I'm also going to show you, if I can get this to work right. Let's not knock over my microphone also. How about that? Here's these guys, the entire Funko minis.
Aha. Oh.
And I don't think I ever showed you Rose in the Mr. Universe shirt.
Oh, no, that's, yeah.
Steady.
We got a couple of roses, a couple of lions, many a Stephen.
I think Lapis fell over.
Oh, yeah, there she is. Is that
There's
two
two
Lapises?
Lapis.
Yep.
Glows in the dark.
Oh, another Stephen. I just saw back there, which is, well, I guess judging by the colours, that's Amethyst is Stephen.
Yes.
So really, there's two amethysts.
Amethyst.
There's not 4 Stephens. Oh, no, 3 amethysts, because there she's, again, behind one lion.
Yes.
And a couple of pearls.
And there's a pair.
Greg.
Yes. I love that there's Greg and Onion, of course. And I think I showed you these guys when we had Onion trade, because there's an Onion. My camera can't go any farther, so.
Yeah, but that's a pretty cool setup. And I kind of like that you can assemble 2 full sets of the lead characters here, at least.
Yeah, some of them have their weapons and some of them do not have their weapons. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, that's
There's
Amethyst.
Steven in the donut shirt.
Yep, donut Stephen. Amethyst at the back has, and that's Pearl with her spear from the looks of things.
Yes.
I'm
Sorry, I
seeing
don't have better
edge
angles on it.
on what I'm assuming are Garnet's Hulk hands, so they're just, well, Lapis has fallen on one of them.
Yes. Maybe
And-
Garnet just punched her for no reason.
And she in turn has her own equivalent to weapons, because one has the water, I was going to say water wings, I just realized what water wings are. The wings made out of water.
Yeah. This Lapis has the wings too, but they're transparent.
Ah, hence I did not quite see them.
Yeah, whereas the other one has them solid because she's glow in the dark.
Is that another
Those are my
Stephen
merch items.
behind Greg?
Yes, this guy.
Ah, yep, then there's him with his shield. Yep. And his starry eyes and expression.
Yes, we just took a ride. Ugh. And now you just get to look at my t-shirt.
It's a pretty cool t-shirt, though.
So that was fun. Yeah, I am wearing a Steven Universe t-shirt, but I'm not counting it as my merch.
I don't think it can be a full merch every time you wear a Steven Universe piece of apparel because, well, you're you.
Yeah, I kind of live in them. Ugh, my Peridot fell apart. So I showed you 2 kind of older sets of things that I had probably showed you partial stuff. And the new thing is a set of socks that Peridot can only wear one of now. So she took her foot off, and I guess they took it home, which is kind of creepy. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Get the rest of her.
Get her piece by piece.
Right. Which piece comes next? I don't want to know. I kind of want those floaty fingers.
Yeah, they remind me of a kind of snack food they have here with their shape and size.
Oh. Well, speaking of which, there's no food in this episode.
No. Didn't have a song as such either.
No, but there were a couple of instrumental songs that have their own titles. I remember that the one where Pearl and Garnet are talking, the title of it is Strength and Forgiveness.
Yep, that's what it's about. Yep.
And I know that they recycled some of the Peridot music, but I believe specifically the one where she's trying to escape is called Peridot's Escape. So that's,
They don't always cut loose with the names on these tracks.
every once in a while there's one that's called something really weird.
Yeah,
I'll be sure to...
which makes them stand out. The rest are so very descriptive.
Yes.
I'm learning new things all the time.
Let me see if I remembered to write down the episode description. So, yep, the crystal gems explore an ancient spaceship.
Yep, that they do.
What other factoids are there? You already know this is the last episode of Stephen Bob 3. When they released promo art about this, the last drawing was just a question mark. So that's fun.
Well, I appreciate they've kept the descriptions vague, if accurate, considering, of course, this would have all been dumped at once.
Yeah, definitely. The only other thing that's kind of factoidy, I think, is just some dumb thing that I saw on the internet one time after this episode aired. Somebody was questioning one of the writers, how did Pearl and Garnet fuse in that tiny space? How did they dance? And the writer, Matt Burnett, here replied, they vogued. But I mean, they don't really have to dance. They can just be in sync. So
and probably we've got to break out of this little box. There's enough of a mutual drive to help with that.
Yeah. I wonder if they would have died in there. Because, I mean, could it get like small enough to crush their gems? I don't know. So they might have just temporarily died. But, either way, probably not comfortable. I think I'm out of factoids. There's not really that much of factoidness out there that I know of.
Well, sometimes we brush on the facts of the episode when we're just thrashing it out.
It's true. Yeah. I think I may have said something earlier, but if I didn't, I just want to give a nod to Steven's voice actor, but also Steven, the character, had a lot of really ridiculous, goofy one-lines where, he's saying things like, have a great weekend to Peridot. And what else? Like, crystal gems are going to get you.
He's just so optimistic this week.
So Steven.
He can't immediately do anything about the Garnet and Pearl matter, so he's probably just finding it where he can.
Aw, Steven.
Yeah.
Smiley little boy.
He knows how to seek the positive energy.
He does. He's just, I love his little statements of positivity. When he grabbed onto Peridot's foot, he's just like, I caught a Peridot. It's cute. That's all I have to say. Any last ideas about friendship that you want to bring up to talk about? Did we do everything?
Yeah, and we talked about how next time, I think, or at least if it were me, and also judging on the series so far, they'd probably have a bit of a lighter episode to just let us cleanse our emotional palate. And I'm not sure what the transmission schedule was like first time round, but I know actually that the network doesn't necessarily always care about that when trying to control the pace, or at least monitor the pacing of the show.
Right. Yeah.
And we've talked about the, what if you waited 6 months and then you got Garnet's universe syndrome?
Yeah. I think there'll be a few discussions we can have about that as we go on. But
yeah, as someone who is watching it in reasonably steady chunks,
yes.
And again, as I've said before, knows that the rest of the show exists, I think that's also the other frustration when you're getting it bit by bit is you can't 100% be sure that it's all going to get to you or even be made.
Yeah, definitely some fear that they were just going to get canceled and we would not have any ending or anything.
I mean, and in this sense, not that I want to stop this in a hurry, but if for some reason we could no longer do this podcast, if they, outlawed them or the internet fell over or whatever, I at least know that I could, even if not sharing it with Ivy and you all out here, I know I could watch the rest of the story and get it. And I think if I were a viewer in 2014, which I think is where we're up to now, especially with the...
I think it's 2015.
Okay, 2015, especially with the eccentric release rate, I couldn't assure myself I'd only be reasonably confident we'd be getting the rest of the season we were told about, let alone anything which kept going past that and made sure it wasn't going to end on a cliffhanger or something.
Right, on a cliffhanger of Peridot flew away. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that was one of the worst things about the uneven schedule is not just not having any content for months, but not knowing when it was going to come back. It's like, I wouldn't be super happy if you told me I had to wait 5 months, but I would also be able to tolerate it a lot better than the unknown that we frequently had to deal with. And I do believe after Stephen Bomb 3 ended, there was a void of no news for a while. I seem to recall that, which was especially difficult to bear after we had been spoiled by 2 Stephen Bombs back to back. And after Stephen Bomb 2 ended, they announced Stephen Bomb 3 and told us it was called Week of Sardonyx. Thanks a lot, Cartoon Network. Before we even knew what Sardonyx was.
You could take that either way. If you don't know what Sardonyx is, maybe it's a tease to have you asking, what's a Sardonyx?
Yeah.
I need to tune in and find out.
Yeah. A lot of people did speculate that Sardonyx would be Garnet and Pearl's fusion, but other people thought it would be a new villain or a gem weapon. Or I even saw one person who not only a theory, but with some fan art attached where someone thought that maybe there would be, if Lapis and Jasper figured their stuff out, maybe they would reform as a different fusion and Sardonyx would be a healed version of Malachite. That's
an interesting idea. I suppose it kind of points to what we were talking about before too.
Yeah, it does. interesting that there was so much speculation, and this all happened kind of right at the fever pitch of this show for me, when I had pretty much very recently discovered it, and I was like extremely excited about it, which I remained and still remain. But it was like, this was a fantastic, fun new world full of amazing mysteries, and we didn't know anything. But do you want to know what we're looking at for next time?
What's next time?
Next episode is called Nightmare Hospital.
That makes me think
There's your breather.
Of Connie's mum's job, actually.
Yes. Yep. Although I hope that her job is not typically a nightmare.
But nightmare is just a title, maybe. It does at least suggest we're taking a break from the larger arching plots. Unless this is the hospital where Peridot goes to get her foot reattached.
Yikes. There we go.
I just happened to have been reading about medical horror last night, so this is...
Oh, fun.
It probably sounds... I'm probably thinking of something even worse than is actually going to be.
We shall see. All right. Well, I think now that we're talking about what's next, we should wrap up with this one.
Yep, so see you next time, gentle listeners and viewers, in the Nightmare Hospital. I couldn't really work that into a segue because it's just what it's called. It's already there.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Ivy and Daria on Not So Giant Women.
You can find episodes of the show in video form by looking up Not So Giant Women on YouTube.
Or in audio form at anchor.fm/NotSoGiantWomen or your podcatcher of choice.
You can also find us on Facebook. Audio production by Daria.
Video production and music by Ivy.
Daria can also be heard on Podsploitation, the Ozploitation podcast.
And Ivy at her Steven Universe fan blog at love-takes-work.tumblr.com.
Steven Universe was created by Rebecca Sugar and remains property of Cartoon Network.
No infringement is intended.